So our next section of the trial is going to be working through mobile evidence. Mobile evidence is the trickiest type of evidence because there's a lot of different things you can do for it. The first thing I'd recommend is we have a YouTube video that shows you how to actually set up your phone if you're going to do your own phone acquisitions. There are some setting changes you do on the device that does not affect your actual evidence that allows the device to be seen by the operating system. If Windows cannot see the operating system, neither can your Paraben tool. It's pretty simple. So we want to encourage you to watch that video, but I'm going to guide you through the pre-done labs that we have for you. We have one Android and one iOS lab. Each one of those comes with a guidebook that has been included for you with the trial so you can see the different types of data and the different capabilities you have in the tool. So I'm going to walk you through that right now. Welcome to Paraben's E3. You've gone through the tutorials that tell you how to set up the software, and so now I'm going to actually walk you through a tutorial about an Android device. Sometimes getting started in smartphone forensics can be very intimidating, so to try to help with that, we decided to create some sample images that you can bring into the tool and do some analytics with it. Paraben's been known for analytics for a very long time, where we add some really unique functionality that allows you to see all the pieces of data that you really want in an investigation or examination. So whenever you start the tool, you originally start up and you get a tutorial menu, and you saw that in the prior video. With this one, I've just got the open wizard options. So I can acquire a device, I can add evidence, I can import data, or I can open an existing case. So when you're dealing with mobile data, you're going to create acquisition files. Those acquisition files are what you're going to actually bring into your case file. So I've already provided those for you in your download links, and those are the .ds files. To work with those, I'm going to select the Add Evidence option because it's already been acquired as evidence. So when I select that option, a case is automatically created. You saw that very short dialogue that came up. Now I've got a whole lot of choices in front of me, so don't be intimidated. It's really not that hard. We're going to go to Paraben Tools, and we're going to select the E3 mobile case file data, or the .ds case file. These are the acquisition files that we had created for you prior. So we're going to bring those into our case, and then that way we can go through and do analytics. You see here on the left that there are a lot of different options available to you. Right now we're going to focus just on that smartphone data. With your fully functional demo, you can go through and work with any type of this data. So you really have a universal tool at your fingertips. Once I've selected this, I'm going to select OK. I'm actually going to go to my desktop. So I'm going to navigate to my desktop, and I have a directory called the E3 Trial Sample Evidence. I'm going to open that, and I see I have 3 different types of evidence. These are the evidence types that we provide to you. So I'm going to open my Android phone image, which is called Android-Trial. I'm going to highlight that image and select Open. It's going to name my evidence. I'm going to just keep it with the same name, but if I knew my suspect's name, I could take and change this, and I could say I'm investigating Amber Schroeder. I'm instead going to just leave it as Android Trial. Now we're going to go through and we're going to wait for the tool to think a moment and open that case file. You'll see that your dialogues have grayed out a little bit. That's just your computer thinking as it actually adds it in as a piece of evidence. We know it's completed when we actually have a reminder dialog come up. So let's look at our overall. Welcome to Paraben's E3. You've gone through the tutorials that tell you how to set up the software, and so now I'm going to actually walk you through a tutorial about an Android device. Sometimes getting started in smartphone forensics can be very intimidating, so to try to help with that, we decided to create some sample images that you can bring into the tool and do some analytics with it. Paraben's been known for analytics for a very long time, where we add some really unique functionality that allows you to see all the pieces of data that you really want in an investigation or examination. So whenever you start the tool, you originally start up and you get a tutorial menu, and you saw that in the prior video. With this one, I've just got the open wizard options. So I can acquire a device, I can add evidence, I can import data, or I can open an existing case. So when you're dealing with mobile data, you're going to create acquisition files. Those acquisition files are what you're going to actually bring into your case file. So I've already provided those for you in your download links, and those are the .ds files. To work with those, I'm going to select the Add Evidence option because it's already been acquired as evidence. So when I select that option, a case is automatically created. You saw that very short dialogue that came up. Now I've got a whole lot of choices in front of me, so don't be intimidated. It's really not that hard. We're going to go to Paraben Tools, and we're going to select the E3 mobile case file data, or the .ds case file. These are the acquisition files that we had created for you prior. So we're going to bring those into our case, and then that way we can go through and do analytics. You see here on the left that there are a lot of different options available to you. Right now we're going to focus just on that smartphone data. With your fully functional demo, you can go through and work with any type of this data. So you really have a universal tool at your fingertips. Once I've selected this, I'm going to select OK. I'm actually going to go to my desktop. So I'm going to navigate to my desktop, and I have a directory called the E3 Trial Sample Evidence. I'm going to open that, and I see I have 3 different types of evidence. These are the evidence types that we provide to you. So I'm going to open my Android phone image, which is called Android-Trial. I'm going to highlight that image and select Open. It's going to name my evidence. I'm going to just keep it with the same name, but if I knew my suspect's name, I could take and change this, and I could say I'm investigating Amber Schroeder. I'm instead going to just leave it as Android Trial. Now we're going to go through and we're going to wait for the tool to think a moment and open that case file. You'll see that your dialogues have grayed out a little bit. That's just your computer thinking as it actually adds it in as a piece of evidence. We know it's completed when we actually have a reminder dialog come up. So like I mentioned before, we like to keep the interface fairly simple and easy for anyone to follow that might be getting started in the field. So our first tab we have is our case. That's the first thing you need to do, is you have to have somewhere to be able to put your evidence, which is our second tab. Once we've added data in our evidence, then we would move on to our analysis, where we're really starting to break down the data and find the little nitty-gritty details that we like. Then we have our specialized tools, we have our view options, and our export. So literally you're working left to right to add information in. So this add evidence option, that's the same as the dialogue I had when we first started the tool, where I added in my Android trial evidence. So if I wanted to do an acquisition, I would be working from the start acquisition, because it's a way to actually pull the data off the device and add it into my case. The overall interface is relatively simple as well. We keep a tree view, so that's kind of like your directory listing of all of your evidence that you're looking at, if you want to think of it that way. We have our main viewer window, which is breaking down the details of that directory into chapters. And I think relating it into a book makes it a lot easier for everyone to understand how to work through digital evidence. And then we have our properties, which is the actual content inside those chapters. So if I had any images or text files I wanted to view, I'm going to see them over here in my properties, and I'll see additional tabs come up that allow me to view that particular piece of data. And then down here we have kind of our footnotes, or our bookmarks, which allow us to go through and keep information that we think is valuable and put it in here. What's running in the background is some of the cool things that, as a geek, I really appreciate, where you start seeing the multi-threading associated with the tool, so I can start a task and still working on another one. I always like to be efficient with my time, so I find that to be super valuable. We put that dialogue here on the bottom, and it's minimized where you're not able to see it right off the bat. You just have to highlight over it and click on it, as I'm doing here. And you'll see that the top of the interface also will go through and refresh. Okay? One of the advantages to having it so it isn't in the way, it gives you larger viewing windows, and you can pop it up anytime you want. It's all in your preferences. You can also resize any of these dialogues if you have one particular area you find to be more interesting or more valuable. You can do that. And I'm going to adjust it to kind of work like that. That's my preference on my size. I might change it as I have different things happen within it. You also note that I had one tab here, now I have 2 tabs. That's because I clicked on my hash databases. These tabs will dynamically be selected based on what information you're working with and what particular functions you're adding into it. I'm going to close that for now because I don't need it. And I'm going to go into the basics of looking at my data. So I've already added my evidence, so I have an Android trial file here. We know I kept it that. As soon as I highlighted that, we see over here my properties dialog went through and added a refresh to it. So we know that everything is dynamically related to one another. I'm clicking on these arrows to open them up so I can see my data. If I highlight the name of my device here, we see I now have a huge tree view popping up here, and over here in my properties view, I see the properties associated with this phone. There's some cool information that are just basics in your property when you're doing mobile forensics, so I think it's important to pay attention to it. You'll find information such as the firmware associated with it. You'll also see the network operator type, so this one happens to be a Boost mobile phone, which tells me it's a burner phone. A burner phone is one where I don't have to have a particular data plan associated with it. I can go in, I can pay cash, and I can set up a plan that's a pay-as-you-go. So it's nice to know my tool can support burner phones as well as being able to support ones that come with plans associated with them. It tells me my processor type, and I scroll down here and it also tells me whether or not there's a SIM card present. I find that super valuable because to me that's another piece of evidence that I would go through and want to acquire into my examination. So just starting with the basics, I've already learned information about my suspect and my suspect's device. The other things that I have over here is I have kind of the breakdown of the information associated with it. Since this isn't a full training video and I'm just trying to give you the essentials so you can kind of go through and try things out, I'm going to highlight particular features. I'm not going to do everything in the tool. There are full training classes that are both in person and online that you can take that go into the deep dive of every feature in the tool. I'm just going to give you a simple overview. So now we're going to deep dive into that tree view. Now with your trial, we've given you kind of a little handbook that has some questions and answers, and we actually tell you what the answers are. It's like having that teacher's edition, which will let you kind of walk through the tool itself. I'm going to highlight some functionality. I'm not going to do your guidebook with you. I want to have that so it's something you can do after you watch the videos. So one of the most intimidating areas I find when I'm looking at mobile devices is when I double click here and I open my file system. When you're looking at a file system to a device you might not be super familiar with, you can be very much intimidated and say, oh, I'm good. I don't want to go through and look at this right away. And I get it. It makes sense. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a slightly different process and something that's very unique to the Paraben tools. We're going to highlight our top node, which is our device. We're going to right click on it, and then we're going to go to content analysis. When I originally designed this tool, I was thinking, how are we going to make it so everyone's going to be able to find the data we need? And when you're looking for a needle in the haystack, one of the most important things you can do is separate that haystack into smaller piles so you know exactly what you're looking for. That's what the content analysis options are designed to do. It's allowing you to kind of build a filter on the data so you can look at it in smaller stacks of data and not get intimidated by that file system. So I'm going to pull up the content analysis wizard, and it's going to walk you through what your choices are. You can absolutely leave it on your default choices, and then as you get more familiar with the tool, you can change it so that you can customize it for what type of data you might need in a particular examination. By default, I choose to sort the data, which is breaking data into logical categories such as documents or databases or graphics or multimedia, and we identify those all by header, but we break them into categories so it's very easy for you to see them in that category. So if I want to look at all the graphics, I run the content analysis wizard, I sort the data, and I can very quickly say, here are all the graphics associated with my device. Indexing is a very simple concept as far as it's like taking that book that I keep referring to and dumping out all the contents and then making a very quick reference list for it. So if I were doing any quick searches and I was looking for Amber and Schroeder, I can look for those together and then almost immediately get results back from my index. You spend a little bit of time at the front of your investigation going through and actually indexing the words, but at the end results, you're going to make everything a lot faster, especially the more and more data you deal with. I absolutely recommend to index it. Then something that's very unique to Paraben is this option here, which is extract and index text from graphic files, or OCR, so optical character recognition. You'll see that I have English enacted here. On our website in the customer zone, we have the ability to go through and download other optical character recognition packs for a variety of languages all over the world. I'm not aware of any other tools that take the time to actually do the OCR functionality. When I'm working with mobiles in particular, I find this super valuable because I never pull out my phone and go and take a note on it. What I do is I'm walking around, no matter what country I'm in, if I find something that's very interesting, I will take a picture of it. And that picture then represents that data to me. But when you're going through and you're doing a search for that, that picture is not going to mean anything to your searching engine unless you do an OCR. That OCR gives that picture the meaning by being able to interpret the text in it and allow me to search it. So it can save you a lot of time overall. And then the last thing, we can scan Windows PE files for malware. That is an option for you. In most of my examination, it isn't super applicable, but it doesn't hurt to leave that option up there. For the data analysis options, which is my second choice over here, we'll see that none of them are checked. It's not checked because my content analysis wizard knows I'm dealing with a mobile device, and these data analysis options are associated with computer forensic data. So if I had a hard drive image in there, they would be enacted in my wizard, reminding me these are the choices I should be looking at. We really try to be your companion throughout the examination or investigation process. You'll see me using those words simultaneously as far as examination and investigation together. The next thing I'm going to do is look at my advanced options. For these are if I really want to be picky, or if I'm in a very short period of time, I can choose to skip the archive data. I can skip health files associated with them. I don't do that personally, and it's because I always like to look at everything possible. I'm kind of that paranoid. I don't want to miss anything. No stone goes unturned. So I leave them checked by default. So if I hit finish here, we'll see that nothing has changed as far as what I'm looking at here. I can still go through and navigate through data on my left side, but what has happened is we see down in my task pool here, my task pool has done where it has a content analysis started. So that's the big part here, and I can see that it's running. When it finishes, one of the things that was added into the tool that we thought really would help you out is we have a little pop-up dialog that comes up that just says, hey, look, I'm done. Because a lot of times you'll pick these wizard options and then you'll walk away from your examination, you'll come back and you want to know they're finished. So we're going to be optimizing our time, so we're going to keep looking through our details here. We can see the basics over here of contacts. We see if we highlight this, then we can see the basics over here where we have our Paraben support lines and the main Paraben phone number. All of our data in this is associated with very much Paraben related data. If I go through and I want to highlight my thumbnails over here, it tells me, oh, wait, it doesn't have a picture associated with that one, but this one does. So I highlighted that. Nope, still no picture. So no big deal, that's not where I was expecting to find my picture. But then I also see over here my tree view, so I went from my contacts here over to recovered. I have recovered data. So when you're looking at a mobile device, most of the time what we call deleted data is we call it recovered data, because there's no way to really know that the user is the one that chose to delete it. So we really have a terminology issue here. So all we do is we call it recovered data, and we're going to show that data to you. I'm going to highlight that in another area here. Let's look in SMS. We see our SMS history. And one of the things, so you're probably wondering, hey, I can't see all the data over here. You have a scroll bar there that allows you to go through and say it. Now, see that data, pardon me. Now look what else I have as an option is I can go through and I can rearrange how I want this data displayed to me. And a lot of people forget about these type of simple functionality that's in it. And the reason is I want to see the timestamp and I want to see the text associated with it right next to it. So it works just like an Excel spreadsheet where I want to pull a column over and I want to rearrange it, making it super easy for me to review that data. I have similar data in my MMS. If I click here, I have my MMS history, but if you look at the SMS versus the MMS history, we see we both have recovered directories, but this one has attachments. Now that makes sense in an MMS situation because that's a multimedia message. So it's going to have some type of graphic or media file. It could be a video, whatever it may be, that's associated with that actual textual data. So I'm going to close those off so you can see that. And we're going to bring up the very basics associated with our installed applications. So that's where we're going to go next. Okay, so let's look at installed applications because we know that's a primary thing everyone wants to pay attention to when they look at mobile devices. So we've got our Android device and we're going to look at our installed applications. It looks very similar on an Apple device, but we're going to show that as well as we walk through some of the Apple data in just a little bit. So our installed applications, we have three primary things that we're going to be looking at. We have an installed application list, an application permissions, and then we have application data. So application data actually represents parsed data associated with the application. Installed application is, the list is actually a comprehensive list, I'm going to pull that up, of all the apps that this device has installed on it. And you'll see even the little app icons associated with it. So it makes it super easy to kind of follow what you're looking for, because you might be able to identify more with the Instagram app logo than noticing the name of it. If I again scroll over to my right, I see I have a lot of cool information over here. I have not only the category that it falls in the Google Play Store, since this is an Android device, I have the manufacturer of it, and then I have some helpful hints from Paraben. So I have a parsed application data, which allows me to go through and see that data directly in a really pretty view form. And then I have the actual raw data associated with it. So if I select this navigate to parse data, we see my application data over here opened up. I had Instagram, and all of a sudden I can go through and look at the details associated with it. Okay. I can see media, which there's going to be a lot of media because it's Instagram. It's very graphically based, and this is always that scary part because I don't know what media file I've clicked on. So let's see. I don't think I clicked on the one I wanted to. So even me, I use this all the time, and it was just a matter of chance to see. I do want to point out something because you're going to see over here, we see how these files have turned blue, but these ones down here are black. That's a really important thing for you to notice, and I've included as part of the downloads that you can get with this, a quick reference chart. That quick reference chart kind of tells you what all of those are. It's actually hidden in the help file that we know very few people take the time to read that, especially going through a trial. But the blue annotation here means very simply that that data has been sorted. So this is where you're seeing that multi-threading come into play. So you know that the tool is actually doing things while you're doing your analytics as well. So it's kind of helping you in the back end. You'll see more and more of this data turn blue as far as the file names and the path names will actually change color for you to know that it actually has been included in that sort. So that's what's happening over there. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to navigate back. So I just scrolled down to navigate back, but you have a second option. So let's say I did choose to navigate to this file and I'm like, oh no, I'm in that file system. I have no idea where I am. Up here at the very top of the tool is we have different buttons, and those buttons allow you to go back in the interface or go forward. And you also have the option up here to show it below the ribbon. You'll see a universal timestamp up here that allows it to default into the universal timestamp associated with your particular region if you need to adjust it. I have mine set for Eastern because that is the time zone that Paraben is located on, so that makes sense that I would have it set to that. There it is. And then we have our other quick access options up here. And again, you can keep it up there or I can show it below. It's all about personal preferences. Okay, I'm going to scroll back down here. And we're going to look at our Instagram account here, which looks like it belongs to Al Paraben. He's one of our iconic logos we've had through the many years. Al has his own comic book series. We like to keep it fun at Paraben as well. And so he's going to appear throughout our evidence. So we know we're investigating Al Paraben now. So he has all of his data associated with his Instagram account, and then I can go through and review this data. Instead of going through and actually reviewing all the videos and photos and having to click through 229 different items, I'm actually going to wait for my sorter to complete processing the data, because then it's going to give it to me in a clean and easy to follow content. It's almost like it knew I was talking about it, because now the sorter has just finished and we can see that the data has been updated in the dialog, and it says, hey, I finished this. If you don't like these little dialogues, you can always choose to close them in the future. I like them because they remind me where I was. So I was just telling you, I didn't want to look through all of Al's pictures that way, so I want to look at him through the sorter. So I'm going to go over here to my second tab, which is my sorted files. I'm going to expand this tree view, and those logical categories that I had mentioned to you before that make sense to people. It's not trying to weed through a file system. It's like, okay, I know what documents are, I know what chats are, spreadsheets, graphics, databases, multimedia. All of these make sense to me, so it's great that I can see them in easy to follow categories. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to open those graphics. So here are all those graphics I was talking about. That doesn't have a whole lot of impact to me. So I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of anticlimactic. That's not very fun to view. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to hit my thumbnails. Now I see what I'm actually looking for. I want to see pictures. And this is where that dynamic dialogues associated with the interface can be great. As you see, as anything I'm updating over here, you see that middle dialogue also update, which is a great point of reference for us, because then I can go through and say, hey, there we go, I see this, I see who they're following. There's a picture of me, so I know that's happening. There's some pictures of dogs. Okay, so they must be following someone who likes dogs on Instagram. So, and we know that some of these are from Instagram, some of the others might not be, but we know that based on my total I had before, and as I saw the graphics, they're just getting larger and larger. There's always tons of pictures on a phone, so you could spend all day probably looking through these. If that's not the case though, and you don't want to spend all day and someone else is going to go and spend all day looking at graphics, all you have to do is you can actually export them from the right-click menu. And all I have to do is hit right-click and export, and I'm going to get an export dialog that comes up, and I could export those outside of my case and have someone else go through and review it. When you have thousands and thousands of different files to look at, sometimes it's great to be able to subdivide the work out to other people. I'm going to go back and pop back over to my content analysis or my tree view, and I'm going to look at those installed applications again. Note that all my pictures or all my text right here is now blue because it means that sort has completed. But I'm going to go back to that installed application list real quick just so we can finish talking about that particular topic. So we know we have all of our data over here. We have navigating to parse data, and you see that it stops, and then it's like, okay, what about all these other ones out here? There are millions and millions of different types of apps in the market, so it's impossible for Paraben to be able to process every single type of app on the planet. It's just too difficult. But what we can do is we point you to where you can look at the data. So instead of making parsers for every app, we give you the functionality to have a SQLite viewer built into the tool. It's a great functionality for you. It saves you tons of time so you don't have to export data outside of your case. And then you can still go through and navigate to that data. All I did was I went and I navigated to, in this case, it was the Amazon Echo device. I see I have a lot of different information, and it might be intimidating. Nothing is going to hurt you by going through and actually clicking to open these different type of databases and saying, okay, what data do I find in here that could be valuable to me? You might find nothing, or you might be able to go through and find something of huge value to you. But you've got to go through and actually explore. Remember, everything you're doing once you've done your acquisition is read only. So you're not affecting any of your evidence at this point. You're able to go through, and it's okay to take the risk and say, here, there's something called files. What's Fabric? I'm going to go and look at that. Or what's the code cache? And so on and so forth. We could spend a lot of time on SQLite. We're actually going to have that as a separate video training that you can do, and we spend time on that in the in-person classes as well that actually break down the different types of data you can see. Okay, so I'm going to go back to that application list because again, applications are always super valuable. So we now know we have a full list of our applications. We have lots of version information. We have the database directory that it can go to, which points to that data. And then there's other information that I see over here. And instead of looking at the malware suspicion in this dialog, I'm actually going to look at it over here in application permissions. Application permissions goes through and it says, hey, I think that this data has this high of a probability of actually being malware. And the reason that we give you a malware suspicion is it's the level of access that app has in the device that makes it whether or not it's highly suspect, or a low suspect item. And instead of just saying, hey, you got to take our word for it, what we do is we give you all the information to the right over here of what level of access it has in the device. And you'll see ones and zeros based on whether or not 0 it doesn't have access and 1 it does have access to it. And you see there's a ton of different states. When you were on a phone, the way that this will appear is these are the things you agree to when you actually install an app on your phone, and it says, are you okay with it having all of these different access points? We're just breaking that out so you can see it in more of an investigative light and see that different data associated with it there. So I want to clean up my tree view a little bit over here because we've kind of gone a little bit over here and a little bit over there. We've kind of been sampling through the tool. And so I'm going to close up a lot of these dialogues. There's a couple ways. I can just click on the arrows and then it will close up the path that I've gone to underneath. But there's one thing I want to point out to you. That intimidating area of that file system that we were going through before, if you notice, our dialogues have updated because the apps that we've been looking at, they're in that file system. So one of the things that it's doing is it's actually navigating you through the file system. It's just doing it in a more user-friendly way. So we're telling you, hey, apps exist here, and we're going to guide you to actually where you want to look for it, as opposed to making you kind of weed through it piece by piece. We're giving you a very easy to follow map to make it through that file system data. So built into the tool, there's other data for you. So we have obviously calendar, browser history. Those are standard apps that you're seeing on the device, so you're used to seeing it. You're going to see some really basic information associated with people's URLs. So here you go. It looks like this person, Paraben, has gone to Paraben's website a lot, so that makes sense. He's a great employee, so we want to have that type of thing happening in there so we can review that information. We can bookmark any of this information. So if I find that this is something of value to me, so IoT support, I think that's super valuable. I don't know any other tools that do that. So I'm going to right click on it, and I have options here on my right click. So I'm going to choose to bookmark selected data. It has where the actual data is located, which is important. It has a storage node associated with it, which tells me it's coming from the default browser history. And I'm going to say IoT support browser link. And I'm going to call it browser bookmark. And I'm going to just hit OK. And over here, we see browser bookmarks show up. You can do those throughout, and at the end of your time with your case, you can actually choose to delete or include those in reports. They're just a great way for you to kind of keep track of what's happening with it. If I didn't want to do it from my right-click menu, you see a lot of times I select those options. That analysis tab over here has a lot of those same options. So there's my bookmark selected data in my analysis tab. So that was in the step I am in my case. So let's look at another part of our case. So we've added this type of evidence, but I see I have this cool thing over here called cloud import. And I don't want to miss out on that capability if I have it within my device. So the way that I know in a Paraben tool that I have cloud capabilities available with a mobile device is I'm going to see this authentication data node show up in my device acquisition. That's a super important thing for you because what Paraben has done is we've gathered together a whole bunch of different keys that are associated with cloud accounts, and then we're making those available to you to add as an additional piece of evidence into your case. Now in this case, I'm going to find this authentication data, which I did in my tree, and I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to choose to export it. In my case, I'm going to choose to do it to my desktop here, and I'm going to choose to export. It says it's completed that task, and now I'm going to import it back in. The reason I have to export it is technically this is a new piece of evidence associated with my case. So I'm staying on that evidence tab and I'm going to bring and import that evidence back in. I'm going to do that through my Cloud Import Wizard. This is a cool wizard. It has two ways that it can work. It can work with authentication data like I'm doing now, or if you actually already know the user's data, you can choose to add an account over here, and if it's a cloud account we support, you can type in their credentials for their cloud account. I'm going to choose to add authentication data file. We know it was on my desktop and it's right there. I'm going to select open. And as soon as I pick open, look what's happened. I now have an Amazon Alexa, a Google Mail file, and a Google Drive file, all associated with my user I'm investigating, Paraben. So at this point, I have not actually talked to their cloud accounts. I'm still dealing with data I got in my original acquisition. If I want to authenticate to the cloud, I need to make sure that my computer is connected to the internet, and then I'm going to choose to authenticate, which is down here in the bottom right. I'm going to choose to do that because I have the consent of Paraben, and I'm going through and it looks like I had success. So that success that's happening is making sure that that cloud authentication, the keys were successful, and I'm going to choose continue. At that point, I see that I have my accounts here and I have a couple choices. I can select a particular date range associated with the data I want to image from the cloud, or I can just take it all. In this case, because it's a trial, I'm going to take it all, and I encourage you to do the same with it. And I'm going to import this data. As I import this data, you'll see success dialogues happening up here. That is actually the capture of this data from the cloud. There's no authentication that's happened that the user is aware of. This is all done in the most forensically sound manner possible. It is important that you should have consent for this data, or you should have a legal right to be able to capture this data. I'm going to choose finish, and it's going to say your import from the data cloud is complete. And we see I have a second evidence node over here. That second evidence node now allows me to see all the cloud data associated with this Android device. It's pretty amazing because a lot of that data would have been inaccessible to me any other way. We saw the Amazon Alexa data before in my application list, but I see I didn't have parsed data. The reason is the Amazon Alexa device leaves its data in the cloud, so this is the only way that I can really capture my user data associated with it. So that's what I have highlighted here is the Amazon Alexa account. I see my user's information here. I have the activities that they did. So it tells all the questions that were asked back and forth to Alexa. So we have the Alexa command. I have pop. I have Alexa that's different. Alexa, thank you. Spell what's in that you say Alexa before you listen to pop music. And then I have the audio files associated with it. So these are my actual recordings that would have happened as someone was talking to this Amazon Echo device. And I can go through and play these files. Now, Paraben is not the best multimedia player on the planet. That doesn't make any sense for us. What we are is we're a great digital forensic tool. So if I want to listen to this WAV file, all I have to do is right click, and again, I'm going to use that export option. I'm going to export to a folder. I'm going to put it on my desktop again. And then I can minimize my tool, go to that folder or that file I exported.
And that's going to be by...
And then you just heard this loud audio file. So you see that all of that is working for you. And then I'm going to pop up E3 again. So have fun with it, explore. That's what the trial is for. But you can play around with the different audio files. If you're not tired of listening to my voice already, you will be actually listening to all of those. The other things that you have capabilities for is obviously now I'm looking inside of the Gmail account associated with it. I've got lots of data, so you get an exposure of how we look at email inside the E3 system. And then if I go and I look at my Google Drive, you'll see that within the Google Drive, I can see a getting started guide. That is one of the files that I have associated with that. You can spend all day looking at that. You'll see another supplemental YouTube video on just how our cloud data works, and that will be available on our YouTube channel as well, Paraben Forensics. So what I've done is I've gone back to my primary tree view, my primary piece of evidence, and I'm flipping over to the analysis tab because I want to walk you through some of the cool options that are here, because as you work through your trial questions, you're going to use some of these functions. So we know we've sorted all of our data, we've indexed it, we did all of our content analysis, which was part of this analysis wizard. Now we have our searching options, which is a very crucial thing when it comes to doing digital forensics. So if I do my keyword search is actually based on that index that I mentioned to you earlier. So I can search for, we know paraben is in there. So if I search for that, I could choose to search for the whole word exactly how it is. Or you see this little dialogue that keeps popping up when I highlight up here. What that's doing is it's saying, hey, I can support a Boolean expression as well. A Boolean expression is very simple. It can be paraben and amber. If I wanted to look at those two things together, or paraben and al, since we have alparaben as our suspect, or I can do amber or paraben or amber. And we see whenever I used a Boolean expression, it tells me I'm correct. It validates my expression there in the middle. And we also see that it's all in capitals. So it keeps it really simple. I have a couple different options here. If I were looking in email, we see I have special functions associated with only email. And then I have an option to load these words in here. So if I want to hit start, what's going to happen is those search results are boom, super quick. That's because of that index that was created. So I have all those options. They're going to show up down here, and all I have to do is open up these different dialogues and we're going to see them refresh. You'll notice that as I use the tool, I'm dynamically choosing to resize based on the type of analysis I'm going to do. So as I open different things here, I'm going to be like, okay, let me open this and see what happens. We see that the last name matches paraben, which is paraben over here, which we know that's our suspect name. It's Al's name. So that hit came up, but you did see how fast that was. That's all because of that index that we decided to create. So with my analysis, if I go back and I say I want to do an advanced search now, I have new options available to me. So I can still do a Boolean search, but I also can do a regular expression, or I can do a simple search. If I were doing a regular expression, if I were looking for a particular phone number, but I didn't have maybe the entire sequence of the phone number, that's when I would use a regular expression. Or if I were looking for credit card numbers, that's a great time to use regular expressions. We again have a separate YouTube video that's just going to be about regular expressions, and then there's an entire section in our help file. So I can search for different types. So we already know we're going to look for paraben just to keep it easy. I have a text search, or I have a hex search option. I can do a search area if I want to look in a particular section. I primarily use this when I'm dealing with computer data as opposed to dealing with mobile data, because you see I can look inside a disk image, I can look inside a SQL database specifically, or just in internet browser data, just as an example. So I don't use it a lot with mobiles, but I will when I use it for the computer. And then there's that file system data again that you'll see with the computer data as well. So with the mobile, I can do a very simple search. I can match my case. If I did that, my lowercase paraben would not match my uppercase paraben over here. So I don't personally choose that option very often. The other thing that I have available to me is I have the ability to change my locale. I'm searching in English because that's my primary language, but if my primary language is not English, I can change that to be a huge list of different languages here. I always joke because the only language we chose not to support was Klingon, and that was my favorite because I'm a huge Star Trek fan. And I said, I can see how it's maybe not as valuable in digital evidence. So we have a huge list here. If I wanted to add Arabic into this, all I have to do is highlight it and move it to there, and now I'm going to be able to search in Arabic as well. So I'm going to move that back because I'm searching in English, and hit OK. If I want to go through, and we're missing some of my dialogue, I got to expand it again just to make it easier. I can set this as my default as my settings go, or I can just hit start, and then I'm going to go through and find search results. Do we see that the search results aren't coming up as quickly as they were before? And the reason was I'm not choosing to search in an index. I'm trying to do a live search of the data. So that's why the advanced search is coming up with slower results than I saw with my index search. I'm going to actually stop this search just because I already completed it. And then I'm going to go back over to my analysis tab to show you one other search option that you have available to you, which is my sorted file search. Now, to do the sorted file search, we of course had to choose to sort my files first in the content analysis wizard, but this allows me to go by very specific parameters. So if I know, let's say this is 630,000 images. That's a lot of images in a phone, but it does happen. And I wanted to do a sorted file search for one particular file name. Let's say we had Paraben, it was Paraben JPEG. So a JPEG of the Paraben logo, and that was my primary piece of evidence I was looking for. I could then search just my graphics, sorry about that, refresh my dialog, for that word. And that's all that would come up. If I needed particular attributes I was looking for, or even a date range, because you see your primary date ranges are here, because everything for your smoking gun for this case is about this one file existing within your evidence. This is a great way for you to, again, separate that needle in the haystack down into the smaller quadrants so that you have an ability to actually find it. You'll save yourself a ton of time, and that's what a lot of those analysis options built into the Paraben E3 platform are designed for. It's to make it a lot easier for you. I'm going to go back to make case content, so we're going to look at a couple other sections in the tool before you get to go at it with your own trial. All right, so we're almost done. You've got to get kind of excited because you get to go through those cute question and answers and kind of work through the data yourself and kind of get a good feel for it on your own. So our last couple tools or our tabs are tools, view, and export. So I'm just going to focus on the tools tab because again, I have a very unique feature in here that I think is super valuable for you. And that is our mobile evidence comparer. This is unique functionality that if I select it here, what it's going to do is it's going to give me a couple different options, but the thing it's the most valuable in it is it's going to be able to give me the ability to compare one case file with another case file. I use this in my cases because there's always two parties associated with a case, whether it's criminal or it's civil, or even if you're doing an audit or a security investigation. I'll take my baseline of the device, so my image of the device, and I'm going to add that evidence in here so we know that mine was on the desktop and it was my Android foot trial. I'm going to hit open. It's going to populate on the left-hand side over here. Now let's say I wanted to compare it after I had already received it back from the other side of my case. So I will go through and re-image the phone, and then I'm going to open that second image on this right-hand side. And what happens is it's going to go through and tell me every difference that has happened. Because technically, from the point that I finish my investigation to the point that I give it to the other side, nothing has changed in it. If it comes back from the other side of my case and all of a sudden a bunch of data has changed, that's a big deal. And so I want to be able to see that data change and be able to note it because it can make all the difference in my case. I'm just going to illustrate to you with your other sample file with an iPhone, so it's going to have a ton of differences. But it's going to at least let you see how it populates the data between them. It's an important feature that is unique again to the E3 platform because we believe that the cross-validation when you go through your digital forensic process is an important part of your case. And you see immediately we got a ton of differences here. It's because our iPhone has a very different file system and we see they're all highlighted because they don't exist on one device at all. And that makes sense. If we see installed applications and application data, it's because those tree nodes, we know those exist. That's part of our case data. But then we see that we have very different information as it goes through. We have a separate YouTube video. You keep hearing me reference that. And the reason is we didn't want to put too much content in here that it made it so this video was too long for you to kind of walk through with me as your use of the trial. But there are going to be separate data videos just about using the case compare functionality and the different areas that you can do it on our YouTube channel, so you can watch out for those. So now we've completed some of our functionality of our tools tab associated with the mobile evidence. You'll see other things in here such as the SIM cloner. We're not going to cover that in this video because that's not something you're really looking at in the trial functionality. So we're going to move into the view tab. This is kind of a nice reference thing for you to go back. If you ever have issues where you're having your dialogues not refresh and things like that, this is where you have your manual refresh options. And if you ever rearrange your layout and it's just all over the place and you're like, oh, I accidentally closed this and I closed that and then I was doing this and I don't know how to get this stuff back. It looks very weird. So all I have to do is go up and hit that view and hit the restore layout functionality, and boom, I'm right back to where I started from, what I started with the tool in the original installation. It's kind of a nice little go back functionality, because as you start playing around again, don't worry about moving it around. It's not real evidence. This is all for your trial, so you get to play with it. And finally, in the end here, we have our export graphics and multimedia option. This is great, again, as I mentioned, if you want to have someone else go through and look through all of those graphic images or watch all those videos, use a separate multimedia player, that's totally fine. I'm going to be able to do a desktop. I'm going to make a new folder, which is my graphics and media. I hit OK. And what's happened is now on my desktop, I have available all of that information outside of my case. Now, I did not close that before, sorry, closing that. It's just finished exporting those results. I hit OK. And if I go over here, I have graphics all broken down into their different graphics, and then I have multimedia as well. One of the things to please note in this is as you open this directory, you'll see we have an image and then we have MD5 files. Every time you export something from the E3 platform, we always add the MD5 hash value associated with the export to make sure that you have a reference point of what the original file was. I'm going to close this in and we're going to go back to E3. So I'm back in E3 and now I'm in my final tab, which is my export tab. I showed you the export graphics and multimedia. So the big question you might be wondering, you're like, she hasn't shown me how to make any reports. Does this tool not have any reports? We do have reports, and we're in the process of actually moving it out into a final tab over here, and tell them, and it's actually part of the analysis tab. So just in case you don't use some of the specialized functionality in the tools, view, or export tabs, we left it far in the right on the analysis tab, because again, you're always working left to right in the tool. If I choose to generate a report, the big thing you're going to see is a lot of different options. We have a ton of different great reports for you. I'm going to actually choose to do my favorite report. I refer to it in slang as the kick-ass report, because it is such a great report to put information in, especially with mobiles, because that's what it's designed for. So I'm going to choose the mobile data review port, or the kick-ass report, and I'm going to then select my different options. I have an option to open the report I'm finishing. I can add my details associated with it. So I'm Amber Schroeder as the investigator. You can fill in this data and it will be available to you in the future as well through the different drop-down menus. I'm going to hit next, and then I'm going to include all the E3 mobile data just because I did not mark things over with my checkboxes as particular items to include in my report. I'm going to do it as all just so you can see it. I'm going to hit next. And here I have a cool option to add a custom logo. I love that because the report is your representation of your hard work. So I'm going to choose a custom logo from my pictures area. I have a lot of good pictures in here. Let's see. I think we're going to keep with the Paraben logo. That makes sense. It goes right in the dialogue. I am going to add a custom header which says confidential. And my footer says confidential as well. If I wanted to add more data, I could. And then I can add an actual summary. I always add a summary in for my clients so they have that at the front of what happened in the investigation, what I found is valuable. All of that's available to you here. I'm not going to go into it because there's actually a separate YouTube video that just goes into the reporting options. And then I'm going to choose to do finish. As soon as I hit finish, what's happened is that task has started again back in my task menu here, and you see our reporting task is started. So as soon as that's finished, I'm going to get a dialog that says my report's done, and voila, I'll be able to review all of my data with a beautiful report that I can send off to anyone. So here is my OK dialog. So the final step in our process is getting to see those reports. And like I was saying earlier, voila, you're done. So here's my report. We see it's under the same name as my device name. It's in my case directory. So I'm just going to double click on it and then we're going to view it. It can open up in any type of browser. I happen to be using Chrome, and so we see the data inside of Chrome. We have our examination summary. That is our first tab that we have, but we notice some other cool things in there. So there's that custom logo that I mentioned, so that can be your organization's logo up there. If I added more details besides just the investigator name of Amber Schroeder, they would all appear up here as well. My investigation summary, my examination summary would show. We see my header, which is that confidential one that I had placed in there. And then we can keep clicking through this and you'll find it's super easy to use. Like I said, I believe this to be a kick-ass report because it is so easy for anyone to follow. It kind of walks them through exactly what they want to see in the mobile device. So we see our device information. We see those properties that I had mentioned prior. We see things like the Boost Mobile, so we know that that was coming from one of those burner devices. We see our installed application list, similar to what we saw inside the E3 platform, but instead it's out there so that someone else can kind of get an idea of what was going on with it. And we see a huge long list associated with it. We have our contacts that were in there before, our messages, and we can see our messages in a timeline functionality. So we have a lot of different options on how we want to view that data. We have our internet history that we had reviewed before that we made note of. And then we also have our images that we had exported out, but you also have the option to include those into your report. So you have a lot of capabilities for you, and you can see them in different batches. We'll scroll on the left here and you'll see that they're broken into the different batches to represent all the different images. So that's a nice way for you to be able to see them. It tells you exactly where they came from as well. And you have a quick reference point. You go all the way down to the end, which is your examination conclusion. So if you had written up a conclusion, you have that available in here. One of the advantages you have is you do have the ability to print, as you see up here. So as you provide this report to someone else, they can go through and print it out. It's a lot of paper when you start looking at printing, especially all of those images that I mentioned and showed you before. So this is just one of the many different reports that you have inside the E3 platform, but go ahead and give it a try and play around with it. Reporting is one of the things that does represent all the hard work that you put into the tool. So it's an area we like to spend some good solid development time associated with it. So we've finished up our Android trial and we're now ready to move on into the Apple trial. So I'm going to move on to that next and kind of walk through some of the basics of what's different in the Apple data that we provided for you in the trial versus the Android data. So I'll talk with you again soon. Welcome to the iOS portion of your trial process. I'm going to walk you through a different part of how we did than what we did with Android devices. We're going to do an import option. So you can acquire an iOS device or an Apple device the same way as far as being able to actually do a logical image of the device. But you can also import the backup records that might exist on the desktop system associated with the device. So I thought it would be great to give you a trial example that was allowing you to use a different functionality associated with the E3 platform. So we're going to start by importing the data. Normally what we would have done is with Android we added evidence because we already had our acquisition file that we had provided for you. If I was going to acquire the device, I would select this option. But now I'm going to choose the import option. The import option is going to bring up my import wizard. I have a couple different choices associated with my import wizard. I have my iPhone backup, which is what we're going to use. I can also do a RIM BlackBerry backup. I can work with a Celebrite UFED case, a Tarantula file, a GPS or a KML map, or I can do tower information, so a CDR record. We're going to select the iPhone backup. We're going to then choose next. We're now going to find our source file. I've already downloaded my trial file, so I'm going to do that from my E3 trial evidence, which is on my desktop. I'm going to do my iPhone phone image, and I have a directory here. That directory looks like a bunch of garbled letters. I'm going to open that directory and scroll down, and at the bottom I'm going to find a manifest file. That manifest file is the primary file that we're looking for. We've provided them all to you because we want you to see what the backup looks like when you import it into a device. So we're going to select to open and then select finish. Immediately you see a whole bunch of different files coming up on the screen and being imported inside my E3 case. Each of these different files represents data associated with my smartphone. So there's a large variety of those. Oh, we see we have parsed SMS history, and now we're done. So we're going to hit finish. We have our existing dialogues that say, hey, this is happening. Did you know this completed? Again, if you don't want to see that, you can just click here and don't show it in the future. Hit OK. And then go to your left to open your tree view. When you open that tree view, I'm going to see my E3 mobile data case, and I'm going to see an iPhone backup. When I see that iPhone backup, then I'm going to see parsed data and parsed recovered data. Remember, with smartphones, we refer to a lot of that potentially deleted data as recovered data. So that's what that section is going to show me here. Up here, we see if I navigate through all of this, I see things that are very basic, like my messages, my Safari history, since that's my default browser. I'm going to see all of that information here. Any bookmarks I might have, call history, etc. I'm going to select close my parse data, and if I look here, I can also see my Safari suspended state and my recovered data, my Safari bookmarks, and recovered messages. So that's just the basics of what I'm looking at as default information associated with my Apple device. But what about some of the other things that I got used to seeing associated with my Android? So I see authentication data. That should be a warning sign for you right there. You know that you have some potential cloud keys. And I covered that in the Android section where I would go through and I'd export this data and import it back in for the cloud. But what I want you to be able to do is now start exploring on your own. I'm going to just show you this basic of how to import the data from an Apple device. And now with the knowledge you have from your Android, where I walked you through the searching and looking through that information, you can now navigate through the E3 tool in your trial and complete your process in looking through this data. I hope you've enjoyed walking through all of the trial with me, and then now it is time for you to go out and play and explore with this tool. Remember, the tool works left to right, so I'm working with my evidence. I then go through my analysis functions. I have my specialized tools. I have some unique viewing capabilities, and then I can export. And don't forget, when you're done with all of your examination, to go through and look at all of your great reporting options, because that's a big part of your tool. We have many other sessions that we can do with you on the trial, but these are just to get you started. We hope you explore and enjoy the functionality associated with the E3 platform.